All right. So today, I just got everything set up. So this will be, I guess, episode 1. Starting off, we are gonna talk about this. So this is the Swift system, and not too many people talk about this. So here's what I'm gonna do: is I'm gonna talk about it. On the 4th, Zero Hedge put out an article that was talking about how, basically the United States. Let me fix this real quick. The United States essentially decided that if Swift didn't cut off, or basically if Swift didn't apply sanctions to Iran, America was going to apply sanctions to Swift. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but I don't even know how that would work, because Swift is basically like the financial, like the infrastructure for sending payments all around the world. So I don't know, it sounds pretty crazy to think that he would do something like that. And basically what he's saying is, look, you either do this or you're gonna have some serious problems here in the near future. And says here that Secretary of Treasury Mnuchin apparently said to Reuters, as saying that Swift is no different than any other entity, adding, we have advised Swift that it must disconnect any Iranian financial institutions that we designate as soon as technologically feasible to avoid sanctions exposure. So I mean, like, you're talking about bringing down the hammer. This is definitely one way to do it. But the other thing that is very interesting about this is the fact that this is pushing Iran away from trading in dollars. Obviously, it's selling its oil to countries like Russia and China, which is essentially helping Russia and China get around having to use so many dollars. Obviously, they still have to trade in dollars. There's no way around it. That's why we're the reserve currency. But having Iran's imports of oil has definitely helped them circumvent having to use the US dollar. Sorry about that. This is the dollar as of today. Pretty much, if you go 1 month. Actually, I wish it had a better scale, but last couple days, this has been basically going up. Let's see if we can. Yeah, we can't, unfortunately. There's no way to know. So anyways, the dollar has basically been going up day after day. I've been checking it every once in a while. This is basically the history of SWIFT, the payment system that I was talking about earlier. If you don't know what this is, I highly recommend you looking into it. It's basically the it's called the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, and its headquarters, I believe, is in Germany. So if that doesn't tell you anything, I don't know what does. Here's the Wikipedia page, which I'll include in the description below, so you guys can check that as well. This is, so for those of you listening to audio, this is basically a map that shows the BRICS banking system, which is the direct competitor to the SWIFT. And so you have Russia, China, India, South Africa, Brazil, and apparently it's connected to into Miami, which is interesting because I don't know if any of you guys saw the video of Vladimir Putin nuking when he was demonstrating the hypersonic nuclear missiles. It showed them bombing Miami, which is funny because that's where the BRICS is connected. And so I think that was also kind of a threat that they would cut off the financials going into Miami from the BRICS investment or development bank. So I don't know. I mean, the whole Miami, Florida thing is really weird. I did not know that it was connected there. But what I'm going to do here is, this is the new development bank site, and I'm going to play this video for you guys, and I'm going to stop it partly way through, and you guys will get a better idea of kind of what's going on outside of the United States and how these particular people involved in the new development bank is, or they're trying to plan the future of the world, and there's certain parts of the world that are kind of, I guess you could say, neglecting. They don't really want to have this any particular group controlling what it is that they can and cannot do. So I'm going to play this for you real quick.
Chris Bishop. Now, it's the big story of the week. We're going to be covering wall to wall on CNBC Africa. The BRICS group of emerging economies, which between them produce 1/3 of the entire world's GDP, has established the new development bank, the so-called BRICS Bank, which has approved loans of $300 million for energy projects in South Africa and $300 million for a transportation project in China. Now, I caught up with the chairman of the bank, a veteran banker himself, KV Kamath, and started by asking him about the impact of what's going to be talked about very much so in the next few days, of the fourth industrial revolution, what it's going to have on emerging economies.
Well, it's very interesting how you put it. And we can look at it in various ways. And let me demystify it. Let me put it very simplest. And, Shanghai, for example, and China, a greater example. The last 2 years added 25 million cycles, China, and Shanghai about 2 million cycles.
When he says cycles, he's talking about bicycles, okay? So he says China buys 250 million bicycles. Okay. That's a lot of bicycles. But basically what he's saying is, so you got all these people riding bicycles, and eventually when the economy gets better and those people do better, they're going to want to buy automobiles.
You may say, what has that to do with the fourth industrial revolution? Without that revolution being in place, without that level of connectivity being in place, this would not have happened. How and why? These cycles basically are parked on the pavement, and you use an app on your cell phone to open the lock, and your meter starts. And you ride it for, let's say, the next half an hour. You lock it back, your meter stops. At the back end, you are charged on your prepaid card. So there is nobody collecting money, nobody giving you the cycle, nobody taking the cycle, the delivery of the cycle after you have finished your ride. It's all automatic. And this would have been possible only with the connectivity that's now available and the communication advances that have been made, which makes this whole process seamless.
So you're saying that this fourth industrial revolution goes hand in hand with disruption?
Yes, absolutely. So sometimes you believe that the fourth industrial revolution will mean electric cars, autonomous cars. Yes, possibly. But at the very simplest level, it would also mean a cycle which is driven by an app and which a common man can use.
So right there, he basically just said the fourth industrial revolution can also be something as simple as, being able to go and pick up a bicycle that's been locked up, with using your cell phone or app, and which, by the way, I have done here in Sacramento, and they have jump bikes all over the place. You can basically just go and find a bicycle, and you open up your app. You can actually find them through the application. They're all geolocated, and you can rent the bike for, it's like stupid cheap. Of course, hopefully nobody heard me say that, because maybe they'll raise the prices, but I mean, it's very reasonable to, ride a bicycle all day. We would take the bicycles out and we would just go bar hopping, and by the end of the day, you're in at like $15, like max. And I'm talking about all day, like you rode hours. So, it's very interesting to listen to somebody like this talking about something as so simple as, like, look, you can go out and you can rent a bicycle for way less than you could ever hope to own an automobile. So it's like you said, it's a big deal in China. There's a lot of people. India, there's a lot of people. And so the BRICS Bank, this particular bank that we're looking at right now, they have a lot of people that are using their system, and I guess what I'm trying to say is, now that the world is becoming developed, our banking system, the West's banking system, is going on the wayside, and we are trying to man that ship before it goes down. So kind of crazy.
And I can say this, in my office today, of the youngsters, 90% of them ride a cycle from their home to the station, then take a tube, and then again ride a cycle to office. And these are all potential car owners who have actually, I think, junked the idea of owning a car. So disruption happens in many ways, which would mean, coming to the hard side, the roads will need to be reconfigured. You will need a different space allocation for cycles and cars and so on and so forth. So there is a whole lot of things that are underlying this, both hard and soft.
What is your role in this? I mean, you've been going for about 3 years now. You've got a $10 billion capitalization. What can your bank do about this?
Well, I think at this point in time is, in a way, and the fourth industrial revolution is trying to stay ahead of the curve, but you already are behind the curve. Because you cannot read what this will unravel in the future, what will open up in the future rather than unravel in the future. And how could you be a part of it? But clearly, we see that the role of medicine, the role of education, the role in terms of entertainment, all these industries are going to change. And even more importantly, inclusive finance, where finance is taken to the masses, is going to change. Because what example I gave you on the cycle is true even more be even more force in inclusive finance, because you could not have taken finance to the mass, to the poorest of the poor, using the old model of a branch, because you just couldn't branch out enough. But with this, you now have an ability to connect the I would say the person who most needs it to the financial architecture.
Where do you see this disruption and this investment happening in Africa?
Oh, I think it'll happen across. The leading indicator will be how well is a country connected in terms of data and connectivity, A. And B, how cheap is it to use data. But I'm always confident. 2 years back, India probably was the costliest in terms of data compared to most countries. Today, I'm told it is the cheapest in terms of the cost of data per unit of data. So disruption happens very quickly in terms of costs getting disrupted. And I'm sure that will happen in, across Africa. And I would think South Africa will be a good indicator how this unravels, not only in terms of just this example, but in terms of all the things that could follow as the benefits of the fourth industrial revolution. From the perspective of the bank, what I have noticed is that it need not be a very expensive proposition. The fourth industrial revolution is not necessarily a very costly revolution. It's going to be a revolution which includes everybody, and by definition, if it's going to include everybody, it has to be an affordable revolution. And I believe that's what it'll be.
It's been quite well documented that.
So he says if he says that the fourth industrial revolution is going to be all inclusive. It's going to be cheap enough to where everybody is going to be making, it's going to involve everybody. Everybody's going to be lifted up. It sounds very optimistic. Obviously, when you have a capitalist society, not everybody wins, and it's, I guess you could say, survival of the fittest. So, I'll be interested to see, how cost effective it is for, the third world countries and the countries that are in development right now. We'll see how well that works out.
The infrastructure gap on this continent runs into hundreds of billions of dollars. Surely anything you can come up with could just be a drop in the ocean.
Indeed, I think we are fully conscious of that. And I don't want to use the word we are a catalyst, because there are many catalysts. Governments are catalysts. Institutions like ours, long-term providers of funding, are catalysts. Banks are catalysts. The marketplace will be a catalyst. And the companies themselves, as they succeed, become catalysts in terms of this growth. So I think it's a cascading effect of various players working together to make things happen. And to start with, everything looks very difficult. But once the momentum gets going, I think economic growth also progresses. And then what was not achievable suddenly becomes achievable.
So anyways, that's the CEO or whatever you want to call it of the BRICS Bank. And I'm guessing he's what's it called? Indian, or from India. So this is from RT, which is sponsored by, in part or in whole, by the Russian government. But we're gonna go ahead and say, I'm just gonna go ahead and say this is all right. I'm just gonna say it's good to go. Russia's alternative to SWIFT payment system poised to eclipse the original. Russia's money transfer system, developed as an alternative to SWIFT, is now more popular than the global network, said Anatoly Aksakov, head of the Russian Parliamentary Committee on Financial Markets. He explained that Moscow is already engaged in talks with Chinese, Turkish, Iranian financial regulators on integrating its system for transfer of financial messages and financial messaging system of those countries. So what we were talking about earlier with you know, the whole trying to get Iran, or Iran has been wanting to basically opt out of using US dollars to trade in oil. And because of that, you know, Russia has been somewhat of like a bodyguard, constantly defending Iran. Same with China. They all are doing the same thing. They want to opt out of the US dollar because the US weaponizes their monetary their reserve currency, and basically people are sick of it, which I understand. I mean, it's like one day out of nowhere you all of a sudden, you know, have basically no way of receiving money for all this stuff that you have. Central Bank of Russia, which has developed the SPFS, said earlier that 416 Russian companies and government organizations had joined the system as of September. They included the Russian Federal Treasury and large state corporations, including Gazprom, Neft, Rosneft, and others. The development of SPFS began in 2014 in response to Washington's threats of disconnecting Russia from SWIFT. The first transaction on the SPFS network involving a non-bank enterprise was held in December 2017, so after the election of Donald Trump. SWIFT is a financial network that provides high-value cross-border blah blah. We already talked about that. The European Union also considered creating an alternative to SWIFT to help European countries bypass U.S. sanctions against Iran. That proposal stalled in Brussels, and major European firms left Iran. So, money is fleeing Iran right now, and I'm surprised that, you know, basically they're even still in operation. So you got Russia, Iran working together against the U.S. Economically and also physically. In the Middle East, you've got Russia, China, and among other countries that are they've got their own banking system. And they've been buying gold like crazy. And then you have the US, who somehow, I don't even know how, by luck, I guess, but basically, you know, our financial system is so awful. I don't even know how we're still, you know, operating on $20 trillion in national debt on top of the unfunded liabilities of like $170 trillion. And you've got this BRICS Development Bank, which is essentially backed by gold. It's, you know, one of the two, which obviously I have more faith in the BRICS Bank. But the U.S. government is going to have to change. They're going to have to do something. I don't know what it is, but they don't get their shit together. China, Russia, Iran, and all these other countries involved in the BRICS banking system is essentially going to take over the world reserve currency, whether they issue a BRICS currency or whatever. But needless to say, it's not looking good for the US or even European countries. Europe essentially is in a dark age right now with the invasion of all the foreigners, and the society is imploding. So it's dark times for sure.